A cheerful announcing girl on the broadcast excitedly revealed the latest CD rankings for that week, announcing that Hello World by Personia was at #1. She shared that just the previous day, Personia had held a live concert at Uegama Beach, which had happened completely unannounced. Akane, while holding a glass in her hand, was listening and thinking that the announcing girl really got worked up whenever she talked about Personia. She guessed that the announcing girl must really like Oni-chan. Suda Ritsuki responded with a serious face, saying that the person was admiring Shion's music, not him. And when Akane pressed by saying so, he, with his eyes closed and face turned away, said that if people realized Shion was a lowlife like him, they would be disappointed. Akane doubted that and said, wasn't he being too negative? Suda Ritsuki denied it, saying he was just being cautious so he wouldn't be hurt by their expectations of the real Shion. He said that was a perfectly reasonable defense mechanism for his mind and asked Akane if she agreed. Akane replied awkwardly, changing the subject by asking about the weather. Suda Ritsuki, while picking up his glasses, said, "Whoops," and got up, saying he had to get ready. Akane, while eating and looking annoyed, asked if that defense mechanism was the reason he was going out looking like that. Suda Ritsuki responded defensively, saying that his outfit had helped keep his real identity a secret until now, while eating his food. Akane replied that it was only because Suda Ritsuki had never shown his true face in public, and Suda Ritsuki added that this was just how he normally looked anyway. He then struck a dramatic pose, emphasizing his untidy long hair and spiral glasses, which he claimed were already out of fashion. He insisted that those kinds of otaku looks just didn't exist anymore. Akane, shown in a close-up while eating, said it was a relief for her if he kept it that way. The two siblings stared silently at each other, with Suda Ritsuki maintaining a focused expression. Suddenly, Suda Ritsuki stood up triumphantly and remarked that if his true identity ever came out to the public, they would no longer be able to keep their current lifestyle. Akane, annoyed, thought that wasn't what she meant, and a note off to the side described Suda Ritsuki as a man who would definitely protect his lifestyle. Suda Ritsuki agreed, saying that if their secret got out, they wouldn't be able to live normally. It would also affect the band's popularity. Akane then said, "Here's a guy with no self-awareness," as she walked away. Suda Ritsuki, still confused, wondered what she meant when that face was revealed. Akane thought to herself that she wondered how many girls would fall in love with Oni-chan in that case. Empty plates were shown on the table, and a school bag with some keychains was seen. Suda Ritsuki apologized to his sister, saying, okay, sorry about that," thinking that he was sure she didn't want to be seen walking together with a sibling that looked like a servant. Akane told him to go ahead first, that she would wash the dishes. Suda Ritsuki waved and told her that he was heading out. Akane responded by telling him to fix his posture. As Suda Ritsuki walked away, Akane mentioned that he had cut his hair a little bit. Suda Ritsuki replied with a smile that it looked nice on her. This made Akane blush, and she asked what. Two girls were seen gossiping animatedly. One pointed with excitement to a picture, saying it was someone right there, while the other blushing admitted that she had seen the news and thought he was so cool. The conversation was had outside the school building. Suda Ritsuki took it all in and kept walking. Another group of girls said that Shion's new performance video was really awesome. Another added that she kept slapping the replay button. One girl said Shion seemed to live in Kanto and wondered if she should go find him there. Suda Ritsuki thought to himself that he had a test that day and shouldn't skip classes. Either he reminded himself that it was for the sake of when the band's popularity was over and for Akane. With his head down, Suda Ritsuki thought to himself that he felt feverish all of a sudden and might have pushed himself too hard. He overheard people saying he looked unkempt. Under a tree, Shina, a beautiful girl with long hair, stood lost in thought, clutching her school bag and looking slightly concerned. Suda Ritsuki began to run away, and Shina noticed his weird-looking movements. The scene shifts to classroom 2B. In the room, a lot of students are shown talking and laughing together. A girl named Hikage Rinka was shown standing quietly indoors, her face absorbed in a book. At the same time, a group of girls were chatting together. One named Hikage Rinka was depicted with a smiling face, her eyes closed as she laughed. Meanwhile, a student named Suda Ritsuki was shown thinking that somehow they had managed to reach the classroom and that their next step was to get to their seat. The door opened with a sliding sound. A group of 3 girls was talking excitedly in the classroom. One of them, with wavy hair, mentioned that she never expected there would be a live concert at the sea. Another girl, Hikage Rinka, said that she got to see Suda Ritsuki's live concert on her birthday and called it the best birthday ever. The third girl, with straight dark hair, added that seeing Suda Ritsuki in the flesh was freaking unreal. A boy named Kaminoki casually joined the conversation, saying that it was all thanks to the information he had gotten for them. One of the girls asked him casually why he was freely inserting himself into their conversation, addressing him as Mr. Eavesdropper. Kaminoki replied, "Ouch, that was ruthless." Then he said that this guy had a name, and he was called Kaminoki. He then noticed Suda Ritsuki leaning over him and asking if he was okay. Suda Ritsuki weakly replied that he was fine. Finally seated at his desk, thinking to himself that he had finally made it to his seat, he heard someone say that Kitaro looked like a zombie and it was so gross, while another girl said that he had always been a creep and that was for sure. They told each other to forget about that and talk about Suda Ritsuki instead. A girl said, and noticed Suda Ritsuki walking away, swaying as he walked. Kaminoki told Suda Ritsuki not to study too hard, to which Suda Ritsuki replied that he knew, and thought that the truth was that the live last night was because of Kaminoki. He told Kaminoki not to come into the conversation, thinking of him as Mr. Eavesdropper. He remembered that when Sakino believed the false rumor planted by Kaminoki, she was willing to cancel her birthday party plans just because she wanted to go to a non-existent live concert. Suda Ritsuki recalled with horror the 2 excited girls talking excitedly about how Suda Ritsuki was going to do a live concert at Yukishima Beach on her birthday. One asked if Kaminoki was serious, while the other girl said she wanted to become Suda Ritsuki's #1 fan. Suda Ritsuki said that the girls in his class didn't consider him as their friend, though, but he resolved that a mere false rumor would not stop him from taking away the smiles of his fans, picturing himself as an idol on stage holding a microphone for the sake of his precious fans and his classmates. He thought that he just had to hold on a little more, addressing his precious body. Just then, the teacher told everyone to go back to their seats. Suda Ritsuki made a strained sound as he sat down. After school, Suda Ritsuki returned home with a faint smile, despite the exhaustion showing on their face. Akane greeted them with concern, noting how red they looked. Suda Ritsuki tried to reassure her, saying they just felt a little feverish and insisting it wasn't a big deal. Akane disagreed firmly, telling them to change clothes immediately and get some sleep. Suda Ritsuki complied meekly. He lays in bed, feeling he had done well on that test. Suddenly, he grabbed a blanket, but Akane cried out that he couldn't use it because she had just been using it. Akane, embarrassed and sweating, tried to explain that she had just been reading manga on it and now it was dirty. Suda Ritsuki, thinking that Akane really was worried about her, wondered if he should crack a funny little joke to lighten her mood. So he said that he doesn't mind her spilling snacks all over the blanket. However, Akane interrupted, saying that wasn't the reason, and told Suda Ritsuki to rest on the sofa until she finished cleaning. He then called out to Akane and, blushing, asked if she wanted to sleep together. Akane, looking flustered and turning red, angrily called him an idiot. Akane then gave him medicine, telling him to drink it and live, angrily shouting not to just say things like that all of a sudden. Suda Ritsuki thought that he wasn't sure whether Akane wanted him to die or live, and feeling that he was hated by his dear Akane again. Later he was shown lying in bed, sleeping, while Akane in the background was thinking that was her chance right there, calling herself a stupid Akane. The next day in class, Suda Ritsuki had confirmed that once again he got first place, his face calm and proud. Suda Ritsuki thought to himself, smiling, why couldn't he be popular for being able to study very well, when suddenly someone called out to him saying, "Hey you." He turned, tense, thinking, was it finally here? His time to be popular? The girl asked if he had time. He replied, huh? Smiling, she made her request. Later, Suda Ritsuki was shown crying and thinking why were tears coming out, but he laughed it off, thinking to himself that there was always something to achieve with studying by himself while everyone else spent and enjoyed their youth. Suddenly, a girl had come up to him with a cold face and asked if he was Suda Ritsuki. After he confirmed it, She said she was borrowing him for a while, and then without funny anything, she grabbed his hand and started pulling him. Ritsuki stood tensely in front of a group of girls, feeling overwhelmed and confused as she frantically tried to assure herself that it had to be a misunderstanding. She wondered why they were ganging up on her. One of the girls was standing with her arms crossed and firmly demanded Suda Ritsuki's attention. Then she accused him of being the reason why she took first place every time, and claimed that it made Yoshiharu unable to get first. When Ritsuki asked if that was all she was talking about, Hikage Rinka asked for a bit of Suda Ritsuki's study tips, saying she would then teach them to Yoshiharu. Suda Ritsuki wondered what was with that cute demand. Some other girls said letting him off that easily was too light, gripping for a more brutal approach. One even suggested beating him to the point that he could no longer study. With her hand neatly on his shoulder, Suda Ritsuki wondered why she was so damn pure, and noted that the way she laid her hand was cute. Hikage Rinka stayed fired up and declared that Yoshiharu could get first place as long as she got his studying tips. But someone said that sounded like it was going too far. Someone asked if Hikage Rinka was scared, and she reacted with surprise. Thinking seriously, Hikage Rinka realized that it would be pointless if Yoshiharu was going to just study even more after that. Hikage Rinka then declared with a determined face that she was going to take away his nerdy glasses, saying he wouldn't be able to study without them. Suda Ritsuki, noting to himself that it felt like she was forcing herself, thought it was better to play along with her for now. Trucking with a flustered face, he told her that if she took away his glasses, he would never be able to study anymore. Suddenly, Hikage Rinka did a kabadan, pressing him against the wall, making it his second kabadan of the day. Rinka, blushing and looking distressed yet apologetic, clung to him. Making eye contact while holding his glasses, she said sorry and promised to return them soon. When Suda Ritsuki reacted with a tense ah. After the struggle, both ended up on the floor. Suda Ritsuki looked at him and said, eh. Rinka, visibly flustered, blushed deeply and clenched her hands, repeating so to herself in awe. As other girls looked on in stunned silence, she thought that Hikage Rinka was so cool. Akane turned to Rinka-san and called her name, asking what was going on. The others laughed, saying maybe his face was too creepy and made her speechless. They called it hilarious and said it was just as expected from a face that looked like a monster, making Suda Ritsuki blush and clench his teeth. Then Rinka-san grabbed Suda Ritsuki's head, her face turning red, and steeled herself with a gulp. She said they were better off not looking at his face. And someone asked if it was something that transcended ugliness. Others laughed as she and Suda Ritsuki stood frozen together. Suda Ritsuki covered his face, stammering. Suddenly, someone pointed out that Rinka's face looked red, making her tense up. Instantly, she changed the subject, saying they had already taken his glasses and they should scram. As they left, they said, "Bye-bye, you monster. Just cry there for a while." Ritsuki repeated the word in his mind, thinking that people from other classes also called him that. He leaned against the wall and recalled that now they could finally get Yoshiharu to the top. The scene shifted to a wide view of the school's exterior, serene and empty except for a few chibi figures lingering in the background, capturing the transitional passage of time into a new chapter of the day. Suda Ritsuki was shown walking down the hallway with his head hung low. He silently wondered how he was supposed to go back to class now that he had lost his glasses. Fearing his face would be exposed, he thought perhaps he could just look down to hide himself. But his worry kept returning to the girl. She had seen his face, and that thought refused to leave his mind. At that moment, Shina, a pale-haired girl, was shown deep in thought with a quiet expression, glancing toward his direction. Suda Ritsuki kept walking and told himself that his spare glasses were in his bag. Suddenly, someone reached out and grabbed him from behind, making him yelp in surprise. A close-up revealed that it was the energetic girl Hikage Rinka, who quickly said, "Shh," and put a finger to her lips, indicating he should be quiet. Suda Ritsuki, with a shocked expression, tried to say something, hesitating with "your," and she responded with "ah." Then a stairway was shown, a silent moment reflecting the tension in the air. Hikage Rinka stood tense and sweating, and after a deep bow she apologized again. She had never thought she would be forced to do such things. With shaking hands, Hikage Rinka returned the glasses to Suda Ritsuki, saying she didn't really need them, as they were only a disguise anyway. Suda Ritsuki said, "Okay," and asked, "Why are you doing this?" Hikage Rinka said she wanted to return the glasses, so after she separated from her friends, she hurried back. "See you later." Hikage Rinka, blushing, said that if Suda Ritsuki walked around without a disguise, it would be dangerous. Besides, she turned to him. Hikage Rinka then suggested that they go and talk somewhere else. The boy hesitantly agreed. As they walked along a rooftop, Suda Ritsuki realized that he hadn't introduced himself yet. He said his name was Suda Ritsuki, and thought to himself that the girl wasn't a bad person after all. He introduced himself, and the girl responded that she was Hikage Rinka. Hikage Rinka added that she knew who he was, calling him the school's #1 student, Suda Ritsuki. Suda Ritsuki thought to himself that such a kind girl had a very fearsome pair of breasts indeed. Suda Ritsuki brought up the past, asking Hikage Rinka about it, and commenting that at the time it had seemed like she was forcing herself when she took his glasses. Hikage Rinka admitted she didn't really want to do any of those things, and that she wasn't interested in Yoshiharu, but said everyone had started cheering her on, saying she looked good with him. She confessed that deep down she was just a timid person, a nobody, and afraid of losing her friends, so she felt she had to live up to their expectations, which led things to become the way they were now. Suda Ritsuki said she'd had it rough with her friends too, and thought to himself that he was in the same boat, also wearing the mask of being popular. Hikage Rinka told him he could just call her Rin, reminding him they were classmates, and Suda Ritsuki reacted with a surprised, "Eh?" Suda Ritsuki, looking flustered and anxious, explained that he couldn't just suddenly call her Rin. He admitted that he thought he preferred calling her Rinka, maybe. Hikage Rinka, hand on chin, considered this, murmuring thoughtfully. She thought that way was much more satisfying. Suda Ritsuki wondered why she was being so meticulous about it. Suddenly, Hikage Rinka leaned in close, her face bright with a big smile, and asked if she could call him Ricky. Suda Ritsuki, blushing, replied that it was okay, he guessed. Hikage Rinka, extremely happy and giddy, repeatedly said the new nickname, Ricky, her words bubbling with joy. Suda Ritsuki, sitting in the background, wondered why she was so glad, but thought that as long as she was satisfied, it was fine. Then Hikage Rinka bowed, saying she actually had something to give him as an apology. Suda Ritsuki looked on with confusion, and she held out 2 event tickets to him, saying, "Here." Suda Ritsuki's face turned dark and stunned as he tried to process the situation internally. Hikage Rinka explained with a smile that the tickets were for a preview screening of a movie that many people had been talking about recently. She cheerfully invited them to go together the next weekend. Suda Ritsuki asked if it was in Shibuya. Rinka confirmed excitedly and said of course he would know, since it was the movie where Personia performed the theme song. Internally, Suda Ritsuki thought intensely that of course he would know about it. After all, it was him, Shion, who was in charge of the theme song. Hikage Rinka, looking nervous, sweating and blushing, responded with a tense, Hikage Rinka, serious and with her face shaded, said that she was really sorry, but on that day. Suda Ritsuki, with wide eyes, interrupted, saying, "On that day I." While she looked surprised, he explained to her that he was going to wander around Shibuya aimlessly. Hikage Rinka now apologized to him for asking so suddenly, and his face changed to shock. Rinka, in a burst of chibi energy, laughed while patting Suda Ritsuki hard on the back, making him yelp in pain as he said it hurt repeatedly. She said that if he was free, he should have just said so from the start, and admitted he had surprised her there. Blushing, Rinka smiled and suggested they meet at her house that day, gesturing that they should exchange their Rhine IDs so she could send him the location. Suda Ritsuki agreed, and they exchanged contact info. Suda Ritsuki made a tense, serious face, like a warrior who protected people's smiles and sometimes appeared when needed. She then grinned and excitedly shouted that she had gotten Ricky's Rhine ID, marveling that she really couldn't believe it. Suda Ritsuki, still in shock, wondered if it was really okay for him to have a high school girl's Rhine contact ID, and hoped she wouldn't ask him to transfer electronic money or anything like that. She then held her phone and, blushing, quietly asked if there were any other girls he had exchanged Rine contact IDs with. Suda Ritsuki, sweating, replied no, saying that other than his family members, there were none. Rinka, blushing and smiling mischievously, thought about how it was just her, emphasizing to herself that it was really just her multiple times. Before leaving, Hikage Rinka reminded him brightly not to forget about the preview screening, her tone cheerful and open. Suda Ritsuki, trying to sound composed, replied that he got it, but inside he was trembling, wondering why he was still shaking. Hikage Rinka grinned wide and confirmed that he better remember. Before waving goodbye energetically as she walked away, Suda Ritsuki, too, waved back, saying goodbye with a smile on his face. Left alone, Suda Ritsuki thought to himself that his identity had not been exposed anyway, and as long as Hikage Rinka smiled, he was satisfied. Suddenly, the school bell rang, and he panicked, realizing the next class was physical education. He had to change clothes quickly, but was immediately worried again. He wondered anxiously what he was going to do about the day of the preview screening that was coming. The scene shifts to the badminton court. Suddenly, a shuttlecock flew across the court, prompting Goda, teacher-coach, to energetically announce that they would be playing badminton that day. He told the students to make pairs of two, and Suda Ritsuki thought to himself that the teacher was so vocal that day, as usual. As students began forming pairs, Suda Ritsuki noticed that one student paired up and said Lego. Another pair greeted each other, and someone said, "Let's go." Suda Ritsuki thought that the phrase, "make a pair," was the #1 thing he hated coming out of a teacher. He wondered why schools were so inconsiderate toward the feelings of loners. Gouda called out and asked anyone who hadn't found a pair to come forward, as he wanted to pair everyone up, even if it meant publicly humiliating the loners. Suda Ritsuki, sitting on the court, thought that he didn't want that kind of attention. He curled up in despair, wondering promisingly who his partner would be. Suda Ritsuki wondered why they seemed so shocked to see a loner like him left over in his mind. He kept asking what they wanted from him. Then a voice called out saying it looked like they had another leftover Suda. Ritsuki turned in confusion and saw the teacher with a smile, adding that he didn't mean it like that, but Gouda, teacher, coach, kept his usual demeanor. Saying they would go with that, someone from the crowd protested against it. Gouda, teacher, coach, ignoring it entirely. He came to a halt and suddenly saw a pair of feet in front of him. Sheena stood there and with a smile introduced herself and said she was pleased to be working with him. Sheena repeated her greeting, head to thigh, smiling softly and saying she was pleased to be working with him. Suda Ritsuki's face became shocked, wide-eyed, and serious. Suddenly, in a chibi scene, Suda Ritsuki leaned close to Sheena with an angry face, while she looked back at him with a surprised expression and a small exclamation. Sheena then called him the future genius drummer, making Suda Ritsuki's face turn serious while he blushed and sweated, and told her not to call him by his stage name at school. The teacher turned to the last two, saying both of them leftovers should team up. Suda Ritsuki and Sheena, standing side by side, responded energetically and awkwardly. Suda Ritsuki, blushing and shouting, "Yes, understood, sir." With that, the partners were decided. In the background, some girls were chatting. One asked if Sheena was with that guy. Another said yes and nothing else. One girl to the left said when she asked Sheena, Sheena said she already had a partner. And the last girl said the same happened to her. Meanwhile, Suda Ritsuki, stilling the impact, Suda Ritsuki still thinking thought that she still had that magnificent aura coming from her beautiful girl. Suda Ritsuki said nothing out loud, but thought she was so cool, despite having no friends. He wondered why she was so popular with the guys, yet had no friends. That was strange to him. Then she turned to Suda Ritsuki and asked what was wrong, adding if he kept looking at her like that, she would get very aroused. With a playful smile and a musical note, Suda Ritsuki, blushing, claimed he wasn't looking and switched topics quickly, saying that she said she had trouble making friends. She asked, "Aren't you a loner just like her?" Suda Ritsuki awkwardly said he had plenty of friends. The coach instructed everyone to begin their warm-up rallies with their partners, explaining that once everyone was warmed up, they would start the doubles matches. Suda Ritsuki turned to his partner, Sheena, and asked if they should start their warm-up rally. But Sheena didn't respond, maintaining an emotionless, uninterested face. Suda Ritsuki called her again, and she curtly told him to stop that already, asking if he was trying to kill her. She said she wanted him to talk to her the way he usually did. Suda Ritsuki then used his usual manner and told her not to just stand there and to get ready for the warm-up. Reacting to her earlier words, she responded that they weren't Suda Ritsuki and Shiina then, so it would be weird if people saw them being friendly. He summarized by saying they were playing the role of classmates, and she quickly told him not to call it that. Shiina, her face turning red with embarrassment, admitted that she couldn't participate fully. She explained that the previous night, someone had done various things to her, making her lower back hurt. The scene briefly flashed to Suda Ritsuki, who had a mischievous grin. In a chibi-style moment, Shiina stood with a blank expression while Suda Ritsuki reacted by leaning close, his face tense. He reminded her that the previous night had been their band practice and said she had probably gotten tired from hitting the drums too hard. Suda Ritsuki, with an intense expression and very close to her face, caused her to panic, realizing how close he was. Shiina quickly apologized for leaving him to make dinner that night, while thinking that his face was incredibly close. In the background, a bandmate held drumsticks and reassured them not to worry, calling herself cast extra only. Shiina in chibi form smiled and told him not to worry, assuring him that nobody had heard them. Suda Ritsuki, also in chibi form, looked embarrassed, his face flushed with relief. Suddenly, Suda Ritsuki turned the topic back to her name, pleading with her to at least remember his, reminding Shiina that he was Suda Ritsuki. Casually, Shiina asked who Suda Ritsuki was, suggesting he might be a child entertainer, making Suda Ritsuki tense and slightly angered. He told her that was enough and suggested that they should get on with their warm-up. Shiina responded that she couldn't, causing Suda Ritsuki to call her a little brat in his mind, and they walked together onto the court. Shiina explained that, while her back was fine, she really couldn't raise her arms very high at the moment, demonstrating that she could only lift them a little. Suda Ritsuki thanked her with an exasperated face, saying she was serious. Shiina mentioned that she had at least raised her drumming skills, and Suda Ritsuki replied that that was actually a good point, using a microphone on the court for comic relief. Suddenly, the scene shifted to the tournament bracket, where Suda Ritsuki reminded Shiina that they had a match coming up. Shiina told Suda Ritsuki not to worry because she had a plan. Shiina, with a determined yet adorable expression, explained her strategy for the match. She said she would run around the court and pretend to play badminton, essentially putting the entire burden on Suda Ritsuki. She told him he had to try his best alone and then demanded a win, making Suda Ritsuki think that she was asking for the impossible. Shiina then asked if he could do it, insisting he could, while Suda Ritsuki screamed internally, wondering how she could expect such a thing. Suda Ritsuki argued that he had already worked hard during band practice the night before, raising his hand to emphasize his point. Shiina reminded him that she had also worked hard, suggesting he should just try his best for now. Suda Ritsuki retorted that the person with her yesterday had been Shion, not him, but she coldly replied that he was Suda Ritsuki, wasn't he? Suda Ritsuki was stunned, clutching his chest dramatically and admitting she had got him there, making Shiina wonder what was with that reaction. Just then, the matches began, with the announcer stating they would proceed according to the tournament chart displayed on the wall. The gymnasium buzzed with energy as students filled the hall, and Suda Ritsuki, carrying a racket with Shiina at his side, noted how the tournament was already underway without them, even doing anything at all. As they prepared for their match, Suda Ritsuki said that the event was being done tournament style and wondered to himself who they would be facing first. He noticed Shiina staring blankly. Shiina then said she would go look at the tournament chart, and Suda Ritsuki responded, asking her to do so. He was anxiously thinking who their first opponents were. On the court, Minagawa and Emi were talking. Minagawa complained that going first was so troublesome, while Emi replied that their opponents were Shiina and Suda Ritsuki, saying this was going to be easy. Suda Ritsuki overheard this and thought to himself aghast that they would be going against those girls. Minagawa and Emi, huh? Suda Ritsuki overheard a cold voice from the side, with a girl asking if they didn't find Shiina annoying. Another girl commented that Shiina had turned down invitations from all the good-looking guys and now ended up alone. In the end, she was paired up with Suda Ritsuki. It was hilarious, she said. The first girl agreed, saying Sheena deserved it. Among the crowd, two girls were talking about Sheena, wondering if she thought she could do anything just because she looked cute, calling her a little brat. Another girl asked if Sheena was eating enough. Without showing any change in expression, Suda Ritsuki thought that if the girls believed he couldn't hear their little gossip, they were wrong. They shouldn't underestimate the ears of a singer. He recalled that Sheena already ate plenty, too much even. Like that one time she ate a cake all by herself. Suda Ritsuki had asked in amazement if she was really going to eat all that in one go. The two rivals, Minagawa and Emi, stood together in the gym with a tense energy. Minagawa revealed with a sly smile that she had just thought of something good, prompting her partner to eagerly ask if it was something bad. As Sheena and Suda Ritsuki approached, the girls whispered among themselves, confirming their scheme. Sheena then told Suda Ritsuki that their match was going first, and he responded in surprise, acting distracted and wondering if the rivals had been saying something just a moment earlier. While they walked away from the rivals toward the court, Suda Ritsuki thought to himself that it couldn't really be anything serious. Behind them, Minagawa and Emi grinned menacingly, their faces showing a fierce competitive gleam. Suddenly, the shuttlecock hit the court with a sharp out, and the score showed Suda Ritsuki's team tying with the other pair. The match continued with fierce energy, with someone having scored a point. The boy with glasses knelt exhausted on the court, panting heavily. Meanwhile, in the background, Sheena and the dark-haired girl cheered, collaborating a winning point. Suda Ritsuki calmed and then began to explain Sheena's plan in a deadpan chibi style, mentioning that the strategy was to reduce Sheena's role, having Suda Ritsuki return every shuttle while she simply watched. In the schematic drawing, that meant Sheena did nothing at all with rackets and birds scattered around her feet. Suda Ritsuki thought to himself that Sheena was unable to move her hands, or so she claimed, and noted that for now, they seemed to be winning the match. Facing each other again in chibi style, both displayed blank and unimpressed faces, marking the team dynamics with silent, comical tension. She, with a mischievous smile and blushing face, admitted that she couldn't get enough of seeing Suda Ritsuki's sweat, heavy breathing, and struggling expression, displaying a pure sadist side. Suda Ritsuki then politely asked Sheena to move back a bit for safety, and she obediently did so, saying as she stepped away. The match continued, and Minagawa signaled to her partner Emi, who responded with an okay, preparing to receive the play. Suda Ritsuki, trying to keep the rally going, hit the shuttlecock a bit too high and realized with a tense face that it was a bad move. Minagawa grinned and thought that when Sheena was separated from Suda Ritsuki was the moment she had been waiting for, and with a yell and determined face, she made her move. Ari powerfully smashed the shuttlecock, sending it flying toward the opposing side, while Suda Ritsuki was stunned into silence and replayed everything in his head. Hikage Rinka, watching from the sidelines, noticed the shuttle's trajectory and wondered if Ari was aiming at Sheena. With a tense face, not saying anything, Ari remained silent. The shuttlecock went to where Sheena was, and she looked up with a tense face. Suda Ritsuki quickly realized he couldn't reach it with his racket. Thinking he would use his body, he moved to block the shuttlecock with his body. The shuttlecock had struck Suda Ritsuki directly in the face. His glasses went flying through the air, and he ended up on the ground with his face exposed. Sheena, visibly shaken and worried, had called out to him. Noticing something, she froze in panic. She had then quickly pulled him close, telling him to hide his face and that he couldn't let anyone else see it except for her. Suda Ritsuki thought awkwardly that she was saying this to prevent his identity from being revealed. With his face turning red, he thought that he would be in trouble if his face was seen there, and wondering where his glasses were. Then he noticed that Hikage Rinka had seen his face before, and remembered, thinking that there was still a possibility that people could figure out his identity from his face. He realized he needed to hide his face fast and looked around for his glasses. Suddenly, Sheena told him that everything was fine and reassured him that at that moment, his face was being covered. He was overwhelmed by her nearness, his face flushed and sweaty. Suda Ritsuki wondered if this warmth he felt could really be Sheena, noting to himself how close she was. Then she said that he would be fine like this and was hugging him gently, her face calm and a bit worried, but relax. He thought that nothing was fine. Shina immediately called out to Sensei and asked if she could take Suda Ritsuki to the nurse's office. Sensei agreed, telling Suda Ritsuki to rest until his nosebleed stopped and reminded him not to forget his glasses. Shina, worried, pointed out the blood, but Suda Ritsuki reassured her that it was fine. He thought to himself that she was mistaken. His blood wasn't from an injury. The girl who had caused the incident offered a laughing apology, claiming she hadn't done it on purpose. Shina, with a cold expression, thought darkly about how that girl dared to do such a thing to Suda Ritsuki. Meanwhile, Suda Ritsuki admitted that it wasn't anyone's fault and confessed to himself that he just got aroused. Later, they arrived at the infirmary. To their surprise, it was empty. Suda Ritsuki, still with a bloody nose, wondered what they should do, while Shina also questioned the situation in disbelief. Suda Ritsuki said he would be fine on his own, but Shina desperately insisted on staying with him, claiming she wouldn't budge. Suda Ritsuki, seeing how much she was worrying, thought her personality seemed to have changed. She kept panicking, saying that if they didn't do something, Suda Ritsuki would bleed to death. Suda Ritsuki, trying to calm her down, told her he wouldn't die from this, but thought internally that the weight of his guilt kept growing. Shina, still a bit embarrassed, listened as Suda Ritsuki awkwardly apologized again, mentioning her soiled gym uniform. He noted that the bloodstains looked pretty horrific. Shina insisted that it was fine and said she would wash the uniform herself. But Suda Ritsuki suggested he would take it home, wash it, and return it to her. Blushing, Shina repeated that she would wash it herself, thinking to herself that since it was Suda Ritsuki's blood, she would never wash it. Suda Ritsuki, meanwhile, thought it would indeed be gross if he brought it home, and noted that his bleeding had stopped. Shina noticed a spare tracksuit on the shelf and said she would change into it. Suda Ritsuki, lying down, said he would rest for a while, and Shina replied with a soft, sure. Suda Ritsu, laying in bed, claimed he would be fine on his own. He told Shina to go on back and get changed. Shina hesitated, her face flushed, and said she could not believe what was happening. She insisted on staying until he got better. Suda Ritsuki responded that he wanted to return the favor. To show her gratitude, Shina began undressing, still embarrassed. At that moment, Suda Ritsuki panicked and told himself to calm down, but his heart continued to race. Suddenly, something unexpected happened, making him shout. Hikage Rinka was startled, wondering what that was about. He repeated to himself to stay calm and not think of anything weird. He tried a distraction technique, telling himself that in times like this, he just had to count imautos. He started counting, imagining 1 akane, then 2 akanes. However, his imagination spiraled out of control, and he found himself surrounded by many chibi akanes. He thought, what is this, heaven? But panicked, realizing something was going to come out. Then a new girl with a bright, energetic expression had burst into the room, looking worried. She had asked, Ritsuki, are you okay? And added that she had heard he was injured. While the dark-haired character, now known as Ritsuki, was sitting up in bed a bit confused, adjusting his glasses, he asked Rinka and said he was fine, but she had suddenly hugged him tightly, her face tearfully happy. She asked if he was really okay and said, thank goodness. With Ritsuki shown overwhelmed, his face comically blank and defeated, he was thinking, oh no, I'm being attacked on both body and mind. Shina had come in and asked what was happening, saying she had heard a woman's voice. Suda Ritsuki was still in shock as Hikage Rinka continued clutching to him. Shina asked who the girl was and why she was calling him Ritsuki, thinking she seemed familiar. Suda Ritsuki wondered why the most popular girl in school was there and thought to himself that her chest was huge and kind of dangerous. A close-up showed Shina's face, devastated and on the verge of tears. Shina apologized to Suda Ritsuki, saying a girl as socially awkward as her shouldn't burden him with her flat chest. After all, she said, Suda Ritsuki already had such magnificent breasts. Suda Ritsuki, stunned, asked her to hold on, saying that even though he didn't understand what was going on, it felt like she was misunderstanding something. If she said it like that, he complained, it sounded like he was the one with big boobs. Hikage Rinka turned to Suda Ritsuki with an intense and suspicious glare, demanding an explanation, and asking what it all meant. She suggested that perhaps he had lied about his injury just so he could take Sheena to the infirmary. Suda Ritsuki hurriedly denied this, insisting repeatedly that it was not like that and pleading with her to believe him. He then turned to Sheena, asking her to explain what had happened. Sheena, still shy, acknowledged his request and began her explanation, saying, "Well." Blushing and holding her knees, Sheena admitted that while taking care of him, it had been her first time facing such a situation, and there had been a lot of blood. She said she didn't want to leave Suda Ritsuki behind and found herself hiding his face in her chest. Suda Ritsuki, with a putty nose and blushing face, thought to himself that Sheena hadn't explained enough. Rinka had giggled, apologizing for ever doubting, and quickly snuggling Sheena in her lap. She said that now it made sense to her. Smiling Sheena, still flustered, had uttered a meek "Rinka-sama." Meanwhile, Suda Ritsuki, sitting on the bed, had looked relieved, thinking to himself that he was glad things had turned out okay, though he had never expected it to happen this way. He had told Rinka it was fine as long as she understood. Then again, hugging Sheena, had remarked that Sheena was just so small and cute. She wanted to take her home. Teasingly, Sheena had protested, saying that her gloominess and social awkwardness were contagious. Rinka, smiling brightly, had told her it wasn't contagious, reminding her that they were already friends. Sheena, blushing and with a sparkling face, had become tense. Sheena, meanwhile, was overwhelmed by the situation. Sheena kept thinking how wholesome it all was, questioning if it was even real, and admitted to melting in Rinka's embrace. Rinka then leaned in closer and suggested, "We should take a bath together next time." Suda Ritsuki thought to himself, telling Sheena not to be fooled, believing that Rinka was clearly holding her with ulterior motives. Rinka then said she was glad Ritsuki was okay, but pointed out that the girl who smashed the birdie didn't even come to check up on them. Sheena, with a straight face, replied that it was fine and said she would make them get on their knees, saying "Dogaza," to which Suda Ritsuki told her to stop with the slander. Later, with a tense face, Suda Ritsuki said they were right there and told her not to lie, while Sheena told Rinka that Suda Ritsuki was that kind of person and that she should stay away from him. Suda Ritsuki thought to himself, wondering if you really came across that way. And Rinka then told Suda Ritsuki that if he liked Dogeza, she would do it for him, but asked him not to force others to do it. He watched as Hikage Rinka and Sheena stood close together, Rinka's beaming face radiating joy while Sheena appeared bashful. Rinka praised Sheena, calling her such a good girl with clear affection in her voice. Suda Ritsuki admitted to himself that he was a bit surprised, not having expected the two of them to have so much chemistry. He recalled that Hikage Rinka was indeed a good person, reliable and kind. With an image of young Hikage Rinka and Sheena holding hands and smiling, he reflected that since Sheena didn't really have any friends, he truly wanted to entrust Sheena to Hikage Rinka, either as a friend or even as her lover. Then, on the other side of the room, Hikage Rinka, blushing and smiling, said in a soft and playful voice that if she had the choice, she would rather kneel down and be stepped on by Sheena. Sheena responded confused, asking what she meant as she couldn't quite catch that. Suda Ritsuki intervened, saying that Hikage Rinka meant it as a massage, but thought to himself that he really couldn't trust her. He thought, but, oh, the thought. Hikage Rinka hugged Sheena tightly and said that since a while ago that space had become holy. Sheena, blushing, begged her to stop. Hikage Rinka went silent and stared at them. Sheena calmly asked her if she had touched the lottery while assigning the seats, her tone steady and quiet. She denied it with a slightly blushing face. Sheena acknowledged this and then fell silent. The scene shifted to the classroom door of Class 2B, establishing the location. Inside the classroom, Suda Ritsuki sat exhausted but relieved, thinking that his nosebleeds had finally stopped. Sheena came over and smiling apologized to him for what happened, saying things had just gotten out of hand. At that moment, Hikage Rinka greeted Suda Ritsuki. Kaminoki, with a confident pose and shining glasses, said he wouldn't be fooled and warned them not to underestimate yokai. Someone reacted skeptically, saying he said some funny things. Then Kaminoki asked Suda Ritsuki how it was. Suda Ritsuki, looking confused, asked how was what. The boy then demanded, with utmost seriousness, what exactly Suda Ritsuki had meant by his vague answer. Suda Ritsuki, blushing furiously, urged him to clarify what he was talking about. Kaminoki yelled that he was obviously asking about how it felt to touch Shina-san's breasts. This was even more shameful, prompting the class to declare that Kaminoki, despite his nice face, was unpopular because he was that kind of person. Shina stepped in and calmly told Minagawa to quiet down, reminding him that they were having an important conversation. Right then, a voice could be heard saying with a dark face that Provnoki was the worst. Minagawa argued sarcastically that he couldn't possibly be the worst and reminded them of what they did earlier. His words left two of the girls stunned and blushing. Shina and Hikage hurriedly left the scene while Suda Ritsuki watched looking surprised. Suda Ritsuki then said to Minagawa that he noticed, and Minagawa replied that he didn't watch every girl's moves for nothing. With the nuisance gone, Minagawa asked Suda Ritsuki with a big smile what Shina-san's breasts felt like. That made Kaminoki stare at Minagawa calmly, while others around them murmured that it was the worst, that they were speechless, and expressed their disbelief. Suda Ritsuki said, "You're that kind of person," while Minagawa, insisting that time was of the essence, urged Suda Ritsuki to tell him quickly before it was too late.